independent processing, Rob, with what you've been doing and with the organization, National Farmers Union. So I'll let you start, Bob.
I'm going to pass the mic on down because I have been doing a lot other than OCM here. So let's get some fresh ideas here.
Well, I don't know about fresh ideas because the good ideas have been out there for a long time, right? It's about doing work to really get more folks to understand, to educate and so forth. And that's a lot of what National Farmers Union has been focused on right now. And by way of introduction, I'm Rob Larew. I serve as National President at NFU right now. And I saw Mike Weaver, I think, earlier. So we've got good representation from West Virginia farmers here. My place is about 200 miles south of you, Mike. But anyway, what we are focused on in NFU right now is trying to educate consumers, even other farmers, as well as our members who don't always fully understand how consolidated agriculture is across the board. They may understand what it is for their situation, if they're a dairy farmer, or like a lot of rooms, there's probably several former dairy farmers in this room. But if it's the beef industry, and as was just talked about, we even see it in the costs and commodity markets there. That this education is going to be critical, whether we're talking about cattle market bills, whether we're talking about cool, whether we're talking about any of the other solutions that are out there. This is complicated stuff, and a lot of us have been in this game for a while. We understand our particular parts when we start talking about packers and stockyards. We can get down in the weeds really quick. But if we want to gather enough support to get real change out there, we have to simplify this in many ways and make sure that we are just educating. That's going to be a big part of it. Fairness for Farmers is the campaign that Farmers Union is focused on right now. You can find more information online at fairnessforfarmers.org. But happy to be here for part of this conversation today.
So I'm Michael Kovach. I'm the Pennsylvania Farmers Union president currently, formerly vice president, but I've got a bad habit of putting my hand up on anything. So yeah, in Pennsylvania, we're really trying to tap into that direct consumer sale. Big part of Farmers Union's mantra has always been capturing more of that retail dollar. And there's really no better way to do that than direct sale. Now, that's not for everybody. So, toward that end, we're very active in cooperatives. Actually, I was just at the inaugural sale of our Western Pennsylvania's Allegheny grass-fed co-op yesterday. I'm on the board of that because, again, I got this problem with my hand. So we're all about trying to keep family farms solvent and getting as much of that retail dollar back to the family farms as possible, and everything that we do revolves around that.
Yeah, I'm Steve Stratford. I work with Winter Livestock, which is a group of sale barns and video auction in the Central Plains. I guess our main thing is to keep the one thing left in the protein business, the calf and the feeder market that is competitive and is bid on it. And the average producer and the average person in this country don't realize how fragile that is and how close we are to losing that. And so we're actively working every day to keep those cattle coming to the marketplace and keeping a fair playing field there. And we are. In the last decade, the challenges just keep stacking up to keep that alive. And with inflation here, we're facing a whole other set of problems because the expenses at our facilities go up and the transportation to that facility. So if fuel and agriculture inflation stays the way it is, it's going to be a real fight to keep those cattle trading in a public market. And that's when vertical integration takes its last big step. If we lose the competitiveness of the calves and the feeder cattle, it's over. So, we're fighting for that every day, and we hope we keep it alive.
As far as OCM has been working, Fred's done an awful lot of work, and Mike here on the system of doing it. One of the biggest worries we have is the infrastructure money that's coming out of the administration is aimed strictly at building plants processing. There's no thought or to a plan in there from the ranch, you know, for the procurement all the way up to the consumer. They're just strictly modeling after processing, and we're hoping that the whole system, we're trying to help with the system and develop a system, a model that can be used that will help other areas do it. And Fred's mostly working in the southeast United States, where, as he mentioned, I guess either last night or this morning, that it's paramount down there because of the cost of shipping everything up here to get it fed and then move it back down there to the grocery stores, that they need something in that area. And if we can get the model plant set up where it starts right there at the ranch and is processed within, say, 100 miles or something like that, and then distributed back through the grocery stores there. But we feel that will keep working in the long run. There won't be this failure because one's area quits and the others, you know, that maybe the supply, that you can always move on to a higher market. And that's the thing, the main thing that we see in there is trying to get those producers committed in there, not just annually, but for over the period of time, whether they own chain space or whether they are invested in the plant themselves or what. That's a real problem. Another problem I would say up in our area, and I agree with the last speaker there, that we need to keep those competitive markets out there. And that, but one of the problems out there is to the west is the larger herds and the age of the producers. We're used to just running a whole bunch of cattle through at the same time, dumping them, you know, maybe get a little break or something before the next year comes around. They don't want to mess with them on a year basis where, like as Dave mentioned this morning in his speech, they need a consistent supply coming through there every month. I do see some younger people coming online that are marketing some steers here and there. It's pretty minute, but at the same time, I think maybe the younger generation would be more willing to spread their calving time out and their, the feedlot time out so that there's a constant supply.
Mike, I was just going to build on a couple of things that's been said. First of all, the theme from Gail's was keeping an eye on the ball, right? And I think kind of going with that is also this notion of learning lessons from the past, because we have a real habit sometimes, certainly in farm bills and other programs, where we make the same mistakes sometimes, or we get a little bit of excited. Right now, we have this huge investment going in. A lot of it's going into processing, whether it's small and medium-sized operations, whether it's focused on cooperatives, and so ranchers and farmers come together on this. That investment, how many times, maybe on a smaller scale, but how many times in the past have we seen similar efforts, either government money or other investment going in, and over the course of just a couple of years or so, suddenly if it's a decent sized plant, that gets bought up by one of the bigger folks out there. And that we just have this habit and this pattern of trying to repeat that. Now, for those of you in Dave Carter here, I don't know if folks have had a chance to visit with him, but one of the encouraging things with this investment this time is that there is this renewed commitment to make sure that there's technical assistance behind it, so that these plants at least stand as much chance as possible hanging on out there and can be successful. And using a little government money, I know that folks, as long as it's not tied to a lot more onerous regulations and so forth, a little bit of investment there in making sure that this infrastructure can be built, I don't think is a bad thing, because we sure as hell have been spending a lot of government resources, and our laws have been written in order to create the consolidated market that we have now. So let's use some of that to come back and try to pull it back a little bit to maintain some of these competitive markets.
Yeah, it's started with chicken in every pot, honestly. We've had a cheap food policy for decades now, half a century or more. With that efficiency comes a lack of resiliency. Obviously, we saw during the pandemic, the disruption from the pandemic. One plant in Pennsylvania, Souderton, PA, JBS plant out there went down, took down 5% of the United States' capacity to process beef. I don't have to tell you guys, this crowd here knows where JBS is from, and it's not here. But problematically, we've consolidated so greatly that we've taken away our resiliency against any kind of disruption. So I think the investment that we're making in these local and regional food systems to include processing is money well spent. And honestly, I think much more would be a good thing. We need to figure out a way to keep ourselves reasonably cheap in food, but even though we're spending a tiny fraction of what the rest of the world does on our food, it's coming with great costs, resiliency, and all the environmental considerations with the way that we're producing food currently. We're paying for it. We're just not paying for it at the checkout counter.
Steve, you just recently were on television. You want to talk about that experience and what led to that, and highlighting the fact of, well, I don't want to steal your thunder, but the most important thing of what you said was one of the last things that you said about, it's not about the heat that we're having right now, it's about the markets. So maybe touch on that a little bit and how that even came to be.
I was actually in the middle of the auction on Thursday afternoon, and Tucker Carlson's assistant called and asked if I could be in Wichita in 3 hours. Got my name from Glenn Beck. I'd been on there before, and their assistants were friends. So anyway, long story short, I ran to Wichita and got to be on Tucker Carlson. That conversation was about the heat deaths in western Kansas, which is a concern in the region. The problem is the general public in the United States don't understand the size and scope of our industry. And that's what's becoming a problem with the packer concentration and the AMAs, that not only the deflation of the fat cattle price, but that's bleeding into the feeder sector. And 30, 40 years ago, a lot more producers would see that. But if you want to revert to when I would have started working at a sale barn, you have a calf sale or a large feeder sale, the place would be packed. Today, we can sell 6,000 calves, and when we start, there's 4 people in the stands. So they don't see it firsthand, and they've lost any connection with the use of internet. They stay at home to watch their calves sell so they can work the rest of the day. What's happening as a fallout of the AMAs on the fed part of it is we're classifying or devaluing the feeder base. We're pretty much, other than the front end best steer, everything else only has 1 or 2 bidders, because their AMA or their certain specs only allows 1 or 2 people to feed them. Where if you compare that to the mid-90s, if a 3-colored steer or a steer with ear or a steer with some flesh was bought $3 or $4 or $5 back, there's many private feeders or individuals that would be able to buy them and feed them. If a crossbred heifer that weighs 9 is $40 back in the market, I can't choose to feed her. I can't sell her. If I buy or put her on feed at a commercial feedlot and own her as an individual, I have no avenue to market her as a fed animal, because the grid and the other requirements devalue her for me, where the corporate feeder, it doesn't. Same thing on that front end one. We're asking the few private feeders left, like in Iowa, to compete on that #1 steer with large outfits like Dodge, Bertco, places in the north that have a special market for them. and it's just continuing to put them out of business. If you revert back to the feeder market a month ago, when those big outfits are in, price doesn't matter. You know, I can't sit here, I don't see their contract, but it's a cost plus somehow. And the farmer feeder's competing against them without that. And he has no option to go to that next class of cattle because he can't market them. Same thing, the Iowa feeder has to overfeed that animal and then in turn takes yield grade 4s and 5s. It gets mixed with the Brazilian trim. The packers profit and we lose another farmer feeder in Iowa. There's nobody to compete on the front end. So, you know, it's happening and it's happening fast. So I guess that's our mission, is to try to stop that and try to figure out a way that we can get the farmer feeder back into it.
I'll open it up to questions and feel free to jump in. Anyone can answer any other questions.
So basically what you're saying is that we're all at the mercy of captive supply. I mean, they've tied up in the Northwest anyway. The 3 big packers have tied up the supply of cattle that if you're an independent feeder, you can't compete. I mean, you just can't compete. When I was president of the Livestock Market Association in the state of Washington, just to give you an example, we had 19 sale barns. Now we have 3 left in the state. I mean, the rest of all the cattle, the numbers, as far as cattle in the region is concerned, haven't gone down that much. It's just that they're all tied up in a captive supply situation. And those guys don't dare cross those guys because then they don't get the cattle killed. You know, just the way it is. So that's a comment, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna build off that comment just a little bit because it's right on. And we've got a couple of bills, right, that folks are talking about right now. And, you know, we had a discussion about whether or not, you know, we need to put a lot more energy into getting mandatory cool back in place, or we want to deal with the cattle markets specifically. That discussion is going to be there. We're going to have the farm bill coming up soon. And one of the things, again, going back to this theme of keeping our eye on the ball and making sure that we don't repeat the problems of the past, is that when we get time for a farm bill, and I was there, you know, close to midnight, the night that the cool deal was struck back in 2008. Huge victory. We were just, you know, we had to make some compromises there at the end, but we got it done, right? And then, of course, we watched. In addition to that, we got the competition language in there, which led to the Packers and Stockyard rules that then were delayed repeatedly, and you know, or each year by Congress and so forth. But the problem that we get when we get into this next farm bill is we do run the risk, I think, of being too splintered. So we do need to find ways to work together. There's plenty of topics that we can all agree on, right? And I'm sure that there are several that we have huge differences on, but we've got to be together on a lot of these issues here. And when prices rise just a little bit, get stronger, right around farm bill time, people become disinterested. They take their eye off the ball. And once the farm bill is done, you know, you got at least another 5 years before you get another shot at that. So really just stressing, you know, that we, it's easy sometimes to take your eye off the ball when prices are either strong. There's so many examples. See Deborah out here in dairy and so forth. There was also another situation, farm bill. Corn prices were high. Remember that a few years ago? And at the time, everybody was telling the folks that were writing the farm bill, corn is never going to get down again. It's never coming down.
Yeah.
So we need to design a program that is going to help us with these feed costs and address that. So what happened? Corn came down, prices came down from milk, and they couldn't. The program wasn't designed for the problem right there. So as we work together, as all these groups and so forth, keeping focused and keeping an eye on that prize is going to be really important, regardless of what else is happening around the edges with the farm.
Rob, or what are the solutions to this cattle marketing? What if we had more processors, individual processors or butchery facilities within the countryside? And rather than going to big meat packers. But I think one of the problems there again is over government regulation, probably of a small processor. They can't butcher any cattle without a state inspector. Of course, you should have state inspectors, I'm sure, but they can't butcher any. But yet the big packers, they can do their own inspection, self-inspection. Now, where's the logic behind that? But I think that would be an answer to it. Or I mean, it would help. It'd be a slow process, but it would surely help.
I hope my bio in there doesn't mention the fact that a number of years ago, I spent a couple of years at the Food Safety and Inspection Service. The folks that I did this, I wasn't an inspector though. In fact, that was the person that had to answer reporters' questions, and that happened at the same time that we had that cow that stole Christmas and the marks and so forth with the mad cow. But anyway, the point there is that particularly for small and very small, the resources, processing facilities, the resources for them to be able to meet the regulation, meet food safety standards, just hasn't been there. And so we have to make sure that we do that. We have to make sure, that states that have state inspected have the ability to sign the compact to be able to move across state lines. There's a bunch of that, making sure that those folks can be viable out there. I had a JBS comment, it's a little bit of a, but I just wanted to also point out that, as we're here working hard on these priorities and we're trying to get some progress made, I just want folks, nobody's going to be surprised by this, but JBS is definitely investing heavy in this next farm bill. Part of that is because of the work you guys have been doing and all of us collectively trying to raise a lot of these issues. They are finding some of the best lobbyists, Democrats and Republicans in town. They are spending heavily on that. So I don't think we can match them dollar for dollar on that, but we can certainly match them in terms of energy, and we've done it before and we can get it done again. But I just want to make sure, didn't think there might be any doubt, but JBS and the others are certainly investing right now heavily in making sure that we don't get competitive markets.
Okay, Steve, I'd like to reiterate some of the issues you have in the sale barn business, but I tell people daily, and the people here with the government need to understand, but the fear of retaliation is very real. It's not a joke. These people don't have to say one damn word and they'll threaten you within your life. Especially when you're a cattle feeder, if you get enough money involved, you're at risk. And it's just a matter of time. I happen to be a cow-calf producer. I've had a run-in with a Tyson order buyer in my area over the 4-H one year that I was bringing into politics, into the fairgrounds. And he was stealing cattle from the businesses basically at the buyback sale for $10 under the market. And I was able to get the market within $2 with the calves that were being fat there at that time for sale. And it really raised a big ruckus between the industry people there in my Northwest Kansas area. But the fear, I mean, that guy ran around like I was going to bow down and kiss his feet. And I was more like, I'll turn around and you can kiss my rear end because I don't need you. And I told him that. I don't need you. I have no business to sell to you any way, shape, or form. And it is real. There's people that don't have the guts to do what I do. But the fear of retaliation is very real. This gentleman back here mentioned the packing plant industry. we had an opportunity to get a small plant built, 3,000 head in my area. And people in the community, one big issue is water. Understand the value of good water versus just water, good clean water. And the community was opposed to that because of the influx of immigration. So we have to be careful. People have to want that, but that's an issue.
So Steve, if you want to respond to, did you have anything that you wanted to respond? He directed it towards you.
He's exactly right. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything out obvious or anything that would be punishable or printable, but you know, if they don't like you, you're not on their list, they can make you overfeed them 3 or 4 weeks. And with $7 corn, you know, that's even more devastating than it was at $3.50 corn. Not to mention if you're having to grid those cattle, the yield grade 4s and 5s or the heavy carcasses that kill you. So it's pretty easy to do it, and I guess not have anything that's punishable, I guess. And it happens every day. I mean, that's how they've put the farmer feeders out. I mean, the vertical integration, the theory that the big feed yards are more efficient, I mean, that's just total bullshit. There's nobody more efficient than a farmer feeder in Iowa. Gives away his machinery, gives away his time, his labor, and everything else, but they have to feed them 3 or 4 weeks longer. They have to pay expensive freight. You know, a lot of those cattle come back down here to process, and you know, they get basically they get their primes and their high choice and CAB stolen with the yield grade 4 and 5s and heavy discounts. So they're better at their game than we are.
Who sets the discount on yield grade 4s and 5s? Who actually, I mean, the gap has gotten ridiculous now. Who's setting it?
Well, ultimately, the packers set that.
Yeah.
And the people that send the cattle on the grid agree to those specs when they do it.
Yet if you're a captive supply feeder, the grid is different for you than it is for me as an independent.
Correct. But that Iowa farmer feeder discounted $20 a hundred in the meat for a over 1050 carcass. Some of the biggest feed yards right now in the north are getting a premium for that carcass. You know, not only are they not getting discounted, they're getting a premium to supply tonnage. Because the lack of, it's also why we have the big cash discrepancy in the north right now. I mean, we've lost those farmer feeders in the southern plains. We're $10 to $12 a hundred back. Those big yards that are in Nebraska, you know, are getting a premium for heavy carcasses where the farmer feeder is getting a discount. It's to supply tonnage to that Grand Island plant, so they don't have to bid more in the cash up in that country. And one other thing is kind of an odd, but the vertical integration and the size of scale of everything getting bigger costs the producers in a lot more ways than you think. Again, if you revert back to like the mid-90s, I would buy the same amount of calves for stockers and growers than I do today, probably. But it was a different game. I sent 250 people. Now I send 10,000 to 3 people.
Yeah.
So what has that done? The management's totally different. Who profits off that is the pharmaceuticals. Because now priced into your cow-calf that you're selling is, I'm gonna kill 3% of them and we're gonna mass treat them with Draxxin. That's the way you can only physically handle that many cattle in dead calf month of October, November, when everybody dumps them on the market. Where before, when they went 200 head, they went to a clean pen, somebody that's not running a lot of cattle, and they're doctoring them with penicillin or something cheap before the calf even knew he was sick himself. Now we're running, everybody that is still in the business is running so many of them, they cannot manage them. Yep, and so that's priced into, you know, here's what we're gonna give for a calf. We're pricing in, we're gonna kill them, and we're gonna mass treat them. And the economy of scale has hurt the cow-calf producers $50 a head, and that alone.
I want to thank you very much for the panel. All right, so we have lunch coming.
That's right.
All right.
Hello, gentlemen. I want to thank you for your discussion today. I am a lifetime Farmers Union member, I want you to know. So, but with that, I'm gonna be hard on you now, okay? I was on the Cattlemen's Beef Board for 6 years, from 2010 to 2016. That administration had the opportunity to take control of that board and take control of that checkoff, and it didn't happen. And Roger Johnson and I had discussions about that, and he was too busy chasing a farm bill. Now, you just listen to Steve talk about the results of policy and what it's doing to the market. Everything he described to you was a result of policy. Now, you got to get those checkoff dollars out of NCBA's hands. Because when you start having your farm, I'm sorry to point my finger at you, that's kind of rude.
Okay.
But when you're gonna have your farm bill meetings, you know what's gonna happen. Testimony's gonna line up one person after the other, how great it is, and don't touch it, and it's perfect. And that's being funded by my checkoff dollars. That's what's going on. At the end of the Obama administration, I spent 45 minutes in a room alone with Secretary Vilsack and laid out all the contracts to him. He never blinked his eyes and he never asked me a word. And I realized within 2 minutes, either he knows what's going on or he doesn't. And it was the prior. 2 days later, he'd come out with a second checkoff would be voluntary. Rob, I'm not going to blame you for the sins of the past. But you have an opportunity with this administration to get control of that checkoff and take that money away from those people who are going to turn around and testify against you in those policy areas. So I want to thank you all. I'm sorry I was so hard.
First of all, I didn't take this job for folks to not be hard on me. This is what it is, right? And we're all in this together. We take the challenge. I mean, my board, the folk that I answer to, some of who are in this room right here, and Scott back here, Oklahoma, want the same thing, and we'll be working together to make it happen. Absolutely. Glad you brought it up.
Thank you.
Let's continue that conversation over lunch. So with that, thank you, panel, very much. I appreciate it. Let's give them a round of hand.